Okay then, hello everybody, and welcome to our first online workshop. There are at the moment about 25 people in here, so we are still waiting on a few, but that's fine. We'll crack on with them. They'll catch up, I'm sure. Anyway, just to introduce ourselves, so I'm Owen, I'm the SPA chair. Ed, do you want to?
Yeah,
I'm not today, so I'm just
nice.
gonna pass it on to Ed.
My name's Ed. I'm the Training Opportunities Officer for the SPA, and so I've been writing some guides and stuff across the year. And Gem as well exists. If she's going to mute herself.
Oh,
There we go.
Hang on a minute.
oh, hello. Yeah, hi. My name's Jem. I'm one of the trustees for the SBA, and yeah, have been involved for far too long. And I'm also the founder of Journo Resources, which is a website that helps people get into journalism. And we've got Mila in here as well.
She's waved.
I think Owen, you might need to.
Is she?
I think you might need to be on top of unmuting.
All right. That's what we're doing today. That's what we're doing today.
Thanks. Yeah, as Jem said, I'm Mila. I'm part of the SPA. I'm the communications officer. So I look after our membership and just making sure that everybody's in the loop with what we're doing. You can reach me at comms@spajournalism if you need me.
Okay, so just to run over a couple of ground rules before we start, we're going to ask everyone to make sure that you are muted when you're not talking, because otherwise this is going to be a mess. If you want to talk, or if we're opening it out to discussion, make sure to indicate in the chat that you want to say something, and we'll pop you in. So you can bring up whatever points you have. We are recording this today for the purpose of sharing it out with you guys and with others afterwards. So now is a good time to turn off your camera if you don't want to be seen on that. And at the same time, please don't do anything that's going to make me have to go in and edit it out. Those of you who are in here early already heard that clearly something happened in teaching over here in the first week and we're no longer allowed to share screens. So yeah, don't make me edit anything out. I don't think there's anything else to cover before we start, so I'm just going to toss it over to you, Ed. Are you?
There we go. Yeah, so as you probably know, considering that you sign up to this event, I would hope that you have a vague idea of what this is. But just in case you had forgotten, obviously we're all locked down in quarantine, hence why none of us are sat in a newsroom right now. So it's really hard to cover stuff, as you might imagine. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are probably either an editor or a very involved contributor for a student paper or magazine or whatever. So obviously we're hopefully going to go through today and give you some ideas of how to cover stuff remotely, which is something that obviously you might not be used to doing, so you're used to being on campus able to do it. So obviously myself and German or Wine will be helping as well. We'll basically go through some of the stuff that you might want to cover, how you're going to cover it, and also what problems you might come into doing this all remotely and how to overcome them. Zoom is one example of how to do that because it means that you don't actually have to be in person to speak to people. So the first thing we're going to do is go through, basically we're going to sort of go through some of the stuff that students want to read, and we're also going to open it up to the floor in a second. But obviously the main part of this is that you want to give people an idea. You need to cover stuff. So we're going to go through some of the main stories that people are going to want to read during quarantine. So yeah, I'll kick us off. Basically, we've gone through some of the sort of common stories that student papers cover across the year anyway, and stuff that's kind of like evergreen and doesn't necessarily involve being on the ground reporting on something. So obviously you have to think about like what actually impacts people. So stuff like, I think Jem, there's some of the things you've you noted down earlier was stuff like grades and rent, and like basically about people's performance across the year. So yeah, basically, Jem, do you want to help out with this? And also, so you've noted down some of the things that students want to read. Do you want to just go through that actually? If you're able to unmute yourself, I think I'll need to do that.
Cool. Hello. Yeah, so we've got a couple of ideas which we've kind of brainstormed as a collective yesterday and today. But while I'm just running through these really briefly, it would be really great, like if anyone has any ideas of things that they're covering already, or if there are things that you think students would like to read, like just pop them in the chat, and then we'll come to you, and then we can kind of use this as a way to like share ideas, basically. So I think the fundamental question and the way that we wanted to almost like break this up is, the first question is thinking about what students your audience wants to read right now, and then we're going to go on to, in about 15-20 minutes, talk about like how we actually practically do that, and then we'll finish off by talking about like how you actually reach those people. So for now, it's just a bit of a space where we can all talk about like what those stories that your audience and you, I guess to a certain extent, want to read. So yeah, do jump in the chat and just say if there's anything in that little bar that you've done already or that you think you're interested in, and please start thinking about that now, because once I finish talking, it would be great to get some of you sharing your ideas as well. I don't want to finish and not have anyone say anything, but just a couple of ideas that Ed alluded to that we've come up with already. So just things about how this could affect students, like in really tangible ways. So how will it affect their grades? You know, how might it affect their rent, both in private halls or university halls? You know, is there the possibility of tuition fees being refunded, or what's the deal with graduation ceremonies, exams, coursework? All of that kind of stuff is potentially the stuff that people might be interested in reading about. As well as thinking about, you know, whether online teaching has been up to scratch, because I know that there's been a bit of variety in different institutions as to whether it's been the terms cancelled or whether people have been learning online, and has that actually matched up. And another idea that we kind of put together was that the idea that there might be some collaborative stories that you could all work almost like a cross publication. Like, for example, maybe people are interested to know how your university has dealt with this compared to others, and equally just some more tabloid stuff. So there's things that students might be interested in reading in, you know, free deals that they can access now on, you know, software, or films that you can watch for free, or all of that kind of stuff. Or like, when will Nando's in Surrey reopen? Like, when is that likely to happen? Or what's going to happen with events or club nights, like further down the line? And then a couple of other things that we just wanted to stress, as well as all of that stuff that's, I guess, like the really impactful stuff on how it affects on students and all those questions that you want to know. Is one, to think about how it might impact staff. I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about what you're covering, because they're also your audience too. And finally, just a lot of conversations in like national newsrooms that are happening right now is that people either want to read everything about the coronavirus physically possible, and that's all they want to read, or they want to read like everything but. So I think it's also worth thinking about in your newsrooms and your conversations, like, what is that anything but for you as a student newspaper? Like, what content can you provide for people that are looking to kind of escape all of this stuff as well? So whether that's like, you know, all the things we love about the campus pub, or something else a little bit nostalgic, I think having those kind of conversations, I think is really important. So that's just a couple of ideas. Someone called Media iPad has suggested a couple of things. So whoever you are, do you want to attempt, or Owen, can you attempt to unmute Media iPad so they can talk about that?
They have been
idea?
unmuted.
Hi.
Do you want to just expand a little bit, on introduce yourself and where you're from really quickly, and then what your idea was and how that might work?
Yeah, hi, I'm Molly. I write for Epigram at Bristol. And I guess I'm interested in Erasmus and overseas things, whether it will affect people. I believe certainly all the students at Bristol who were overseas at the time of the outbreak wanted to be repatriated, have been, but it might be interesting checking that out at other universities. And also, I'm studying abroad myself next year, hopefully, but we've been asked to fill out, just in case, they've said that it's not 100% going ahead. So, you know, that's quite interesting, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a lot of people will have like Erasmus students. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure Owen and Ed will agree that the main thing is kind of like speaking to those students and getting their, sounds really obvious, but like getting their take on it. Do you want to go to Lauren, who has some ideas as well?
Lauren McGowan. You are unmuted.
Hi. Hi, I'm Lauren from Impact Magazine, which is the University of Nottingham's paper, and my ideas was kind of like self-care and isolation. I recently wrote an article about that, so like prioritizing mental health, whether it's doing things like meditation or top favorite films and stuff like that, and also activities to do whilst in quarantine, so recommendations by editors and things like that.
Yeah, I think one thing is interesting both of you have raised so far is that this is all they're the kinds of stories that are about the kind of topics you would be covering anyway. So it's interesting to think about the kinds of things you might be covering at this time of year anyway, such as doubts about Erasmus next year, or concerns about Erasmus next year, or mental health and stuff, and thinking about how that might tie into the current situation, as it were. So, for example, another example would be like the recent UCU strike action. Some people are sort of saying about the disruptions that might have had, but also the issues that staff have had and how that might affect them as well. So what's good to think about is the kind of things that you would be thinking about covering even if you weren't currently stuck at home away from your unis. So we've got another one from Lizzie May. Where are you? We'll unmute you. It says about dating apps in isolation.
So I think it's quite interesting because there's a lot of people on social media bringing up the whole debate, like not debate, just the topic of how dating, the whole point of dating apps is to, you know, get to know people, but also then end up meeting. But obviously during self-isolation, you can't do that. So I know a few people who are on dating apps at the moment, and they're finding it quite interesting and having quite creative FaceTime dates. And I think as students, there's I don't know, the younger the people are, I think the more of the chance they're on the dating apps. And I think there's a big kind of range of people who are in dating apps in student life. So I think it's quite a fun topic to cover.
Yeah,
I think it would absolutely be very cool to, like, I've seen some people, my friend of mine got stood up for a house party date the other day. She was only trying to put makeup on like all week and got stood up for a house party date. But like, I think, yeah, something like that is quite fun. If you can get someone to actually do it, because I know you see a load of people have like, you know, dating columns or blind date kind of stuff. Even if you can like set up a blind date or something, like that kind of feature can still be like recreated. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Got from apologies for probably butchering the pronunciation. Asaya.
Yeah,
says,
Asia.
apologies.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. All right, go for it.
Yeah, no. So I know a lot of people. So I'm from UCL for Savage Journal, and I know a lot of people I'm in second year, and like obviously people in their final year as well are worried about entering the employment market when it's already so competitive at a time when like we're most likely going to go into a recession. And on top of that, lots of internships and summer schemes have been cancelled or postponed, so like the experience to be able to like actually get a job is being diminished as well. So it'd be interesting to see students' perspectives on like their worries and like what they're doing to try and overcome it.
I think with that kind of thing as well, sorry to jump on you, Ed, but I think with those kind of stuff, if you've got a real sense, like you guys are the people that know a lot better than I do, like what students are actually worried about. But if you get a real sense that that's what people are really worried about, that's potentially the thing that you can start about thinking, like, is this something we could potentially do like a campaign on, or can you start running a series of like, you know, like where you speak to career experts who can kind of give advice. So I think also just something to have in the back of your minds, because that's like absolutely a massive issue, is just like, how could we do this in a way that's not just covering it, but is saying to people like, you know, we're going to help you through this, or we're going to campaign for some kind of change. I think is worth everyone like thinking about as well.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, as you said, like speaking to like careers experts, because obviously every uni will have a career zone was next to the one I was at before, but they'll all have like an equivalent of that, where it's like their job is to, obviously they might not be taking emails right now, but if they are, it might be worth trying to get in contact with them and seeing, you know, are you as the university still going to help out students? And if so, like an interview with them could be really interesting to basically say, this is the university's response in terms of how they're going to still work on career development, even though everyone's quarantined. But also what might be really interesting is basically every uni will have a set of like 3 or 4 employers who like are like the big employers for that uni. And it could be interesting to maybe get in contact with them and see if they would be receptive to an interview with a student paper from the uni, which they take a lot of graduates from. So like a lot of, like, for example, like a law firm that particularly takes a lot of students from your uni, or like a I don't know, publication that takes on a lot of graduates from like your journalism school, for example, and basically see how, ask them like, is this going to basically potentially harm people's ability to get a job with you, or are you still going to support graduates from this uni? And I think that as well as getting the student perspective, which I think is obviously the most important part, getting their side of it in terms of basically asking them, is it straight? Are you actually still going to support us, kind of thing? I think that would be really interesting.
And like, what are you looking for? Like, what are those employers looking for? Like, aside from your degree, like, what can actually really making that a really helpful piece? I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to hop in and read this one out for Matt, who unfortunately his microphone is broken, so he typed it all in the chat but can't actually say it himself. So they have a story ready to go out either this weekend or early next week that's naming and shaming some of the companies that are still charging people for private accommodation providers that are still charging people, despite that the university is waiving its own accommodation fees. And that is definitely something that's probably worth looking into, is who, think about the private halls that exist for your university and try and reach out to them, reach out to students who are there and see what they are doing. Because just because the university says we're waiving accommodation fees, a lot of students are at these private halls, and that can include students who are first year students. It's not just, at times, I mean, Exeter is the example, as Ed, I'm sure, will also remember, they don't have enough halls for first year students and end up offloading them into these private halls. So that's something to consider.
We want to go to... sorry, carry on.
There was one other part on that one, so I'm just going to read that out as well. They also had their varsity cancelled, but they're looking at getting into touch with some of the players who would have been in those events to see how they're still training. So in this example, they said ice hockey is something that's, I suppose, quite hard to see how people would be training for now in isolation.
Yeah,
do we want to go? I don't know if we want to go to Harry, who had said they had a similar situation at Stirling. Maybe talk about how they're going to kind of approach that.
Sure.
So basically, what happened with us? Can everyone see me? Okay, is that working?
Yeah, we're good.
Happy days, right? Our situation was that basically our university's been doing a bit of an info dump most days. They just take all the information of what they're doing and they're putting that out there, and it's not always as clear. I think it's our principal then sent out a video message to a lot of our students where he spoke about for people who want to leave accommodation early, he spoke about a refund procedure, and that gave a lot of our students the impression, okay, I'm not going to be charged for leaving, only for students who then left university accommodation to be emailed by university accommodation services saying you owe us up to 400 quid. So that's been the thing we sent that story out a few days ago, and it's gained a bit of traction because everyone's been like, the university is these sort of mixed messages coming from the principal, then accommodation services. It's really misled the students.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a common theme at a lot of places, like not just the unis as well, like private halls and stuff. I know people who have had like a message, email 1 week saying, oh yeah, we're going to waive your fees, and the next week saying, nah, don't worry. So I think that, yeah, if similarly, if you speak to, even if you're not in private halls yourselves, or using private landlords, I'm sure many of you are, like any story about that, will always find an audience, because students are always, rightfully so, looking for stories about how poor the housing situation is for students, and also it will probably have quite a decent impact and might even help students get their way. As I can't remember if it was Wine or Jem that said it, it was Jem, yeah, sorry, about doing almost a campaign, so doing like a series of stories about housing might be a good shout, especially if you have something as obvious as the one that Harry said about at Stirling. We've got two more here. We're going to go through these now. So we've got Ollie from The Ball. Would you like to speak?
Let's go find him.
Oliver Toms, he's under.
Yeah, is
There
it?
we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so yeah, we just put out an investigation on Friday because our university said they're waiving fees for on-campus accommodation, but the majority of second and third year students live off campus. So we put out a survey for a week that kind of got all their views, got them to answer a few questions that could be put into graphs, and then we got those that were particularly interested to contact us, and we kind of ran mini interviews with them. So we shared like some of the situations. We had a couple of second and third years, and also some like Erasmus students that physically won't be able to come back into the country. And it was kind of because the university is only partly involved in off-campus accommodation. So we also brought in the local MP and our SU campaigns officer, who were writing an open letter. So we kind of tried to bring it all together to really try and explain the situation.
Okay, that could be interesting. Yeah, I think the, as you said, like the interviewing people, I think is really interesting. I think obviously you've got to be careful with surveys because you don't want to suggest it's like because obviously you've got to be really careful with sample size and stuff. But I think definitely with like the like interviewing individual people on stories and stuff, I think that'd be really interesting. We've got another one from Laura. I think would it speak? Oh, sorry, Lauren, not Laura. Whoops. Oh,
you're confusing me.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah, it was more just a response to Matt, but Nottingham Uni have signed a joint statement with Trent to try and push this private accommodation to stop the fees. And another issue that we have here is that we've confirmed that we'll get the money back, but they're going to go free students' belongings and put them in storage, and people are quite worried about like the invasion of privacy that could cause. That could be another topic to talk about.
I think
crazy. That's that's an amazing story that they're going to be like, obviously like unintended consequence as such, but like going through student stuff.
Yeah, so just for the record, so I'm a current MA student at Cardiff, and I am in private halls. So I've had a similar email from my accommodation. I'm going back, so it's fine. But if people are say they're going to be moving out and then don't move their stuff out within 7 days, as of next week, and considering lockdown might still be going on, their stuff's just going to get put into storage and then sold off or given to charity.
Yeah, because they're saying we can get our money back, but like we don't want to travel in a lockdown. So
so I mean, again, look for a particularly big accommodation providers like CRM, Unite, and I can't think of the other ones off the top of my head, but those are the two sort of biggest ones I think in the UK. Look at the way that they're approaching it, because they often have clashes with the landlords that own the buildings. They manage it, but the landlords own it, which meant that their response has been delayed in a lot of ways. So stuff like, as Lauren just said, that will be very common right now. So look to see that how the big private accommodation providers are doing it, as well as individual private landlords.
I'm going to hop in and suggest one as well if we've got no more suggestions at the moment. So one thing that you should be considering is the long-term health and the short-term health of the institutions at your university. So think about the university itself. Like, this is a massive disruption for them. The massive disruption for cash flow. Think about your students' union, which again is very similar, and if anything is going to hit the students' union more because they don't have the reserves they're funding. These are discussions that are actually happening nationally as well. If you want to get a bit more context, I recommend looking up something like Wonky and looking up how they've been talking about this on a national scale. But it's also really good to think about how it's happening at your particular institution, because you can give insight on that one place that you can't get from a national picture. A good place to start for these is to look up annual reports. They sound really dull. The data can be sometimes a little bit dated, but it gives you a good kind of starting point. So, for example, if you were to find these, by the way, if you're in England and Wales, you want to look on the Charity Commission website. Make sure to use their data search tool. You don't want to use the main one because that doesn't give you the documents. But if you use the one in beta testing, then that does give you the documents, so you can read everyone's annual reports and just pop in your SU or university and they'll pop up. For Scotland, you need to look at the OSCR, I think it is, the Office for the Scottish Charities Regulator. And they will have, in some cases, the similar documents. It can be a bit more complicated with Scotland, though. So you have to hope that they actually are publishing those.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with, obviously, if any of you are in Wales or Scotland.
Well, Wales is under the Charity Commission, same as England.
Okay,
so, yeah, Charity Commission covers England and Wales. So go in there, look up those annual reports. A good thing that might be worth considering is look up how much of their income comes from an SU. Now, how much of it comes from commercial purposes, because that is the kind of money that's at risk. It's your bars, catering, events. Those are the things that realistically, that's the income they're going to lose. And for some SUs, that's not a huge problem. for other SUs, that makes up a very large amount of their budget. There is a lot of fluctuation on how much money comes from the uni, how much money comes from these commercial services. So it's worth going in, have a look, try and work out how risky their income is, and then go out and speak to people, speak to the SU, see what they have to say.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll probably wrap up like this section in terms of like what stories to cover. But I think the main thing, like there's so many different ideas, both from all the different publications. I think the main thing to say here is just that like we will write all these up. So, but just do use kind of almost each other for inspiration as well. So, you know, if one story works in Stirling, it's probably also going to work in Bristol, for example. So it's kind of for you guys as well to tell us how we can be most useful to you. So if it's something where, you know, you'd want like a shared Slack space where people can post in ideas and stuff that they've been doing, or, you know, you'd like us to do, say, like a roundup of like what student stories have kind of done well that week, like we can kind of put all of that stuff together. So just let us know what the best way would be for kind of like continuing this kind of story, like this conversation on what stories on, because you guys are like the best inspiration like for each other. But yeah, we will write all of these up and kind of distribute them widely so that you can use them as a bit of an inspiration. And do let us know like what you end up doing or how you end up doing it, because I think that learning will go more widely. So yeah, we'll move on now. I'll pass it to you, Ed.
Yeah, so obviously we've spoken about what stories we want to look for. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about how to find the stories. So obviously usually you could rely on speak to people, press release and stuff. So we've had a few ideas down, and as before, if you have any ideas, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go over to you. So the first one, just those of you who have your camera on, who here knows what TweetDeck is? Wave if you know what TweetDeck is. Okay, that's about half of you who have your cameras on, and Jem. So for those of you who don't know, most of you I'm sure know what Twitter is at least. Basically, TweetDeck is a website which lets you connect different Twitter accounts together and also create sort of columns. And basically what they allow you to do is do stuff like have one column which is a feed for your personal account, another which is a feed for your publication account, but also what's more important for TweetDeck is that you can have ones that search specific terms or specific things or hashtags or even other accounts as well, what they're posting. So what the use for that in terms of finding news and finding stories is that you can do like, for example, a column which just searches and shows every tweet that has like breaking Sheffield or like Sheffield SU, or you can look for every single tweet that someone posts that at Sheffield SU, for example. So you can look at stuff that people might be, you know, angrily tweeting at your SU or your uni about specific things, and that might be a really, really good way to find stories.
Just to jump in on that really quickly, like TweetDeck is so useful, even if you are using it later down the line to like find jobs. So there's a thing called Boolean search, which is kind of what Ed is alluding to, and it's just basically like a series of commands. It works in Twitter, it also works in Google, so if you want to do some advanced Google searches. So it's spelled BOOLEAN, and it's just a way of really narrowing down what you're searching for. So you might find that you've got less results, but they are the results that are much more targeted. So you can literally find all of the breaking news in Sheffield or all of the I don't know, people in a specific area. So that I would definitely recommend spending just half an hour like getting a bit of a feel for that. Like the example I tend to give is like in Boolean search, one of the most simple things you can do is search with quote marks around something, and that means only searches for that exact phrase rather than it being everywhere. So rather than if you search for call for pitches and got a load about football stadiums, you would only find people who are looking for your freelance pitches. So we'd definitely encourage that, and also using the list function on Twitter. So literally just making a private list of, say, all of your MPs or all of your SU officers, and then you can kind of be the first person to see that.
Yeah. Before we go on the list that we've got, actually, that was a good suggestion from Rasia there, is that confession pages, like some of them are of mixed quality. And you obviously have to take everything you read on there with a massive pinch of salt. But yeah, definitely confessions pages are a good shout. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, we can unmute you, Asia.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That was mainly just what I was going to say. And it's also a good way to, if you want to put out a survey, it reaches to a lot of people who can fill it in.
Yeah.
I know Ed, you mentioned the survey thing really briefly, But I was going to say there's a good resource from Impress and Ipsos Mori. It's just like a 2-3 page PDF, and it's a bit of a tick box on how to know whether like a survey is actually reliable. So like if you're thinking of filling out a survey, like it's quite a good starting point for like what you should be looking for to make sure you've got good data, and we can send that out to you guys if that's helpful as well.
I was going to hop in as well and say you've got to be very careful with surveys to make sure that it's not just about sample size and about reaching people, it's about making sure that sample size is representative. And so a lot of the downfall often that student papers have when they do this is that you'll post them on Facebook, you might post them on confessions pages, and then everyone goes, well, share them as well. And so all of your mates reply, but that's not giving you a real picture of the student body as a whole. And it's not a representative sample, and you've got to be very careful then about the inferences that you draw out of those surveys. Yes, I'm a data snob, so.
So just one final thing on TweetDeck, actually we move on, is as Jem said about Boolean searches, one really, as well as just Googling Boolean search to figure out how to actually do it, a good way to sort of show yourself how it works is use Twitter Advanced Search. That actually uses Boolean search, and once you've clicked search on that, it will show you in the search bar how it's actually done it, so you can sort of learn it via that. The second sort of main point we had about how to find stories was FOI, and I'll sort of, obviously we've done a resource on that before, so we'll link that to you later. But basically, freedom of information request, for those of you who don't know, it's a legal, it's a piece of legislation that was brought in that basically means that public bodies, such as universities, but unfortunately not charities, so not your SUs, have to give information within 20 working days if you request it under this act. Owain, you look like you're about to say something. So
yeah. So just for an update on FOI during this current pandemic. So if you are in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland, or more, if the body that you are requesting it is in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland, have we just lost Jem?
We've lost Jem.
We've lost Jem, but it's okay. We'll carry on.
You carry on. Oh, she's back. We're good.
She's back. Okay. If you are requesting this from a public authority in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland, it falls under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. That's enforced by the Information Commissioner's Office. Now, on their website, they appear to suggest that they are not really going to enforce the deadline at this time. They're not going to take action to make people follow it. There was a vote in the Scottish Parliament, for those of you in Scotland, earlier this week, which has extended the deadline for them up to, I believe it's 60 days.
Working days as well. So.
60 working days, I think, yeah, so that's quite a while.
4 months.
Yeah, so just be aware that those could be slower. And I think in Ireland, I don't think we have anyone from here from Ireland in this chat, do we?
No.
Well, anyway, I don't think they've technically had any change. So
yeah,
that's good. Can I just to read the room a bit here? So, for those of you who've got the camera on, give us a wave if you think you can get information about your students' union using FOI.
I did already say this.
That's nobody,
yeah.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah,
although you can actually, if the uni hold that information,
that's true.
But only if your university hold it, not your student union.
Yeah. Just to pick up on what Harry said in the chat, yes, that you will sometimes get that even outside of special circumstances. This is just as an aside. If an FOI office replies and says that it might be delayed, with the exception of currently right now during a pandemic, you can respond by saying, no, you can't do that because that's illegal. But yeah, currently it's frustrating. FOI is a good sort of resource. If you get a response, great, but it's not something to necessarily rely on right now. The other thing is staff contacts, and we've got written down. Feel free to jump in if anyone, again, carry on putting stuff in the chat if you have any more suggestions. So basically, if you've had like lecturers who are willing to speak to you about stuff, for example, about if you know someone who's part of the UCU, because obviously there's still an ongoing UCU dispute going on right now. So if you have contacts within that, they're obviously a really great resource for stories, especially right now. But also if you, as I say, if you somehow have a direct line to your VC or your, a member of university exec, an interview with them right now on how the university is responding to and also, the SU as well. Stories like that will get a lot of audience because people want to know what the hell is going on. And universities where they're still figuring out if they're doing a no detriment policy, that's something that's really interesting about like mitigation. Local area groups is something we've also noted down. So this one's not necessarily the best if you're doing just for student content, but it can be. It can be a good resource for like stories about the city, not necessarily about the university itself, but they basically, if you join, like there'll be like random groups. Like I've got one from like the village that I live in back home. You won't get any stories from there, but ones where it's like areas of a city, like council wards or something, people will put like, if there's been like a gas leak on a road, or someone will post, oh, there's like 8 police cars outside this house, what's up with that? It could be a good resource for finding some stories about the city. Again, it's difficult right now because you can't get there, but you can then message these people, try and find out what's going on and maybe get a story out of it. So yeah, the best things are they're usually called like community groups or something. Just search for like an area in the city and you'll probably find something. The other data story, you've gone through that already. And then, yeah, press offices. Obviously, they might still be putting out press releases right now, but that's not necessarily going to be happening. On the off chance they do.
I think the ones you're most likely to get are ones around what universities are potentially doing around the pandemic. Like there's a lot of unis that are trying to find tests or making ventilators or whatever. So, I mean, that's also a good news story, so to speak. So it's worth looking out for still.
Yeah, definitely. Mila has just put something in the chat about FOI. Oh yeah, whatdotheyknow.com. That's a pretty good resource. Obviously, if you post stuff on there, be careful because your FOI request will also be visible to everyone else. But for the poor souls who have posted stuff, you can then use that resource by nicking it for yourself. So that's good. Yeah, so unless anyone had any other suggestions about how to find stories, either Gem or Owain as well, if not, we will move on to the next part. Cool. So, oh, hold on.
Should we just let's unmute you, Caitlin, and then you can talk through that, and then anyone can kind of jump in. I'm not quite sure where you are.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to run through? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm currently at Scarborough Sixth Form, or I was until they shut it. But I know that in a school, in a college near us, they stopped the teaching on the Friday, and were only asking for coursework to then be handed in. But ours have carried on teaching lessons via Zoom and Microsoft Teams as if we're still there. And then even though Ofqual said yesterday that the teachers would be asked for the grades and not necessarily evidence would be needed, the college has said that they're still wanting us to keep working up until like May or June. And it was just whether that's fair or how that affects students. And because I know a lot of people are thinking it's unfair that some colleges students now don't have to do work and some do, and if our college is right to keep people working even though Ofqual said not to.
Has anyone else here from any other publications kind of looked at anything around, like, not just the students you have now, but the students kind of coming in? Because I think you're right, that's definitely going to have a big impact on, you might have decided which uni you want to go to, but you're either at a disadvantage or an advantage, kind of. I don't know if anyone's had any ideas on how they cover that.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that as well, something that has been publicised a bit is so what I just said as well, was about to mention, is that BAME students have had have been disproportionately affected by predicted grades because they're more likely to, and working class students as well, more likely to be predicted lower. So this is an art story idea for later down the road, but come September, look at the way that your university's demographics have changed. If there's been a massive decrease in like the level of diversity in the student body, that might be something to look at in terms of the way that the pandemic has affected university entrances. I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's also just a genuinely really good point about, like, even when this is over, like, making sure that you're still kind of looking back at like those impact kind of stories, because there'll be a lot of like knock-ons both in good and bad ways. So looking at how that's affected like your staff makeup or your population of the students, I think is really important. Asia, did you want to add anything to that? I don't know where she...
Yeah, so there were kind of 2 points to that. The first one was obviously about BAME students and working class and the effect that will have on them entering university. And also, I was talking to my friend who's like in their final year of school, and they were saying that lots of universities have been handing out loads of unconditional offers. So UCAS had to ban them, and they were like, if you are given an unconditional offer, you need to report it, because apparently universities have been worried that they're going to lose out financially from this. So they've been trying to get as many students to come without any conditions, but I don't know what effect that would have.
That's really interesting. Like I'm also a part-time lecturer at the University of Kent, and we had a discussion about like unconditional offers for like the journalism course, mainly because we're a really small department anyway. It's only like 30 people a year, but we wanted to actually offer people like some stability. But like obviously that's not a solution that UCAS are up for.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like there are like two sides to it, because on the one hand it's good for people who might not necessarily reach the grades that they might have taken the exams, but then on the other hand, is there like an ulterior motive for these institutions? It would be an interesting one to explore further.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's definitely something that also you just should need to keep on top of. And again, it's something that I think would be a good, like, there's been a couple of stories from here that I think it might be worth us all like finding a way to keep in touch with, and there might be some kind of like collaboration projects. I think would be really interesting to look at how different universities are dealing with this, and then that also kind of puts it in perspective. If your uni is particularly shit, it helps that you've seen where best practice is.
It is worth, I will say on that one, most universities have planned for the fact that their student numbers will continue to grow and grow and grow. You can try and find out what they are anticipating student number wise. It's likely next year going to decrease. Is this what people are speculating? It's actually going to decrease. And so, yeah, the unconditional offers thing is definitely a very interesting approach, and how they're trying to compete with each other to try and rein in the smaller number of students that are going to be here next year.
Yeah. We had something from Lizzie May about a special edition for prospective students. I just want to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, that would be great to hear about.
Oh, I keep unmuting you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm editor-in-chief at the Brunel Times, so for Brunel University, and basically a bit of background information which will explain why we're making it is I created the paper in November because we didn't have a newspaper or any form of student media before. It just ceased to exist a while back. But so we've done 2 editions of the paper, obviously having an online edition, but 1 paper per month. And because we're finding that we're having less content coming in from the writers, I came up with the idea to have like a prospective student paper. I don't know when the release would be, but I was thinking maybe May, June, July, August, any of those will be fine. But it would basically be, it's not the same as our normal papers because we won't have obviously like breaking news, anything that's necessarily like relevant to the time scale, but we would have sections like any other paper would. So a nightlife section, a sports section, an accommodation section, a study section, and a facilities one. And I think it'd be quite good because all of the writers will still be able to write about their experiences as students, but it means that it's a way of producing content and something quite new. And I think also it gets other people involved as well as the writers. They can, you know, interview their friends, and it creates something to do, I think, during this time. I know it's not exactly the same, but
yeah, no, that's really interesting actually. Yeah, so is that, when's that happening then? Do you know the actual?
So I think we're going to start working on it next week, but I don't really know when the release would be best because I think personally for Brunel, a lot of people end up going through clearing, so it tends not to be people's first choice. So a lot of people don't actually know what they're going into. So I think it'd be quite good from a student's perspective to hear about all of the different parts of uni, because, you know, in student newspapers we talk about things that are going on campus, and I think for the most part we've all gone into university looking at the online, you know, things that we see on their websites, but I think an actual newspaper where it's easy to read. I know it's obviously not the same thing with what we're talking about, but I think it's quite an interesting thing as that is a way of producing content if you feel like you're not being able to produce anything.
Oh, cool. We had one.
That's super great.
Oh, what are you saying, Jen?
No, I just think that's a super great idea.
We had another we'll go on to this final comment from Harry. Schools in Scotland have asked teachers to estimate the grades of some teachers will negatively impact higher results for next year. Do you want to just quickly, I'll just unmute you. Yeah, if you just explain what that's about.
Don't think I worded it too well in the chat, but what some teachers have said is that when they're being asked to look at the coursework and the evidence that people have provided over the years, they're just being asked to estimate the grades and maybe boost them from, say, a D grade to a C grade to B grade, etc. And for those of you who aren't entirely familiar with the minefield that is the Scottish education system, you know, and your 6 years of high school, your fourth year, you go do your National 4s, National 5s, and that takes you into your hires, which your hires are the ones that you stick on your UCAS, and you can do more hires and advanced hires for next year. So obviously your Nat 4s and Nat 5s are supposed to prepare you for the higher work, and they're concerned that with all this going on right now, they don't think that people proceeding to go into their hires will be as well prepared and won't be ready for it, and they think that next year, just the way things are going to go, the higher grades will actually take a hit, and that they won't be as good, the grades will go down, and that could impact the UCAS. Either universities won't get as many applicants, or they might have to start lowering their terms for entry.
Yeah, so...
Hila, did you want to add anything, by the way? I know you mentioned Scottish universities as well.
Oh, hold on. She's still muted.
Oh, thank you. No, I just I got reminded because somebody mentioned about clearing and stuff like that, but not to name names, so I don't want to get the uni into trouble, but there was a student that I knew who was on the clearing team at their university, and they told me that actually part of the clearing team training includes looking at where students are coming in from. So in Scotland, because tuition is free, if you're a Scottish student, they then prioritise people who are coming in either from England or from further afield, and it can be a bit of an issue depending on which way you look at it. Obviously everybody will have different opinions on that kind of topic, but it is a very interesting topic to cover. I think at the time that story didn't really reach anywhere because obviously the university kind of shut it down, but for anybody who is independent from their university and has the ability to post stories like that, it would be quite interesting to hear the uni side of it, but also the student side of it, and just general thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think just to round this off then, so basically we've got a couple of other interesting stories you could chase up then, which is basically the way your university demographics might change as a result of this. The route for that would be, I suppose, looking at the stats as soon as they are available, which admittedly might not be until next January, but either way. And then also maybe even looking into schools in the area which your university kind of takes on students from, and interviewing, if you can, teachers and also students. So we've got two more things before we sort of open up the floor to general questions. The first one is, so now we've sort of thought about how you get stories and what stories you are, how to actually get people to read them, which would be nice if you put on all this work. If you get people to read them, that's always good. At least I quite like that. The first one is SEO. And again, just to sort of get a general idea, how many people, again, wave if you have your camera on, sort of know what SEO is? Okay, great. So about sort of a third of people have an idea. So it stands for search engine optimization. It's a whole topic in of itself that I couldn't really cover in like 10 seconds, but basically the idea is it's maximizing the visibility of your website, and in particular your story or your social or your whatever you're posting online. The main way of it, so and again, just we'll do the wave test again. Who here uses WordPress? Okay, almost everyone. Cool. WordPress has quite a few built-in SEO features, the purpose of which are to get your story as visible online as possible. So, for example, these are actually possibly things you already do anyway. You just don't necessarily know that they are like a good thing to actually do to get your stuff read. Stuff like having relevant tags on stories and categorizing stuff properly on your website is like a really basic way of making sure that when people Google like, let's say University of Stirling pandemic, if you have like key search terms that people might like, or like, you know, University of Stirling coronavirus, if you tag any story with those exact words, that's the kind of thing people are going to be like searching online for. And that might mean that your stories get read. And it's something that I think that a lot of people sort of forget because they get caught up in the excitement of writing a story and then just posting it on their Twitter and then forgetting about it. It's like making sure that's actually read. Other key SEO things is obviously like posting it on your social stuff and making sure that it's like you haven't rambled on about what's in the story. You just sort of very clearly write in like a Twitter post for it what the story is about. If Jem or why have you got any more sort of?
Yeah, I can say a few bits. But yeah, I think the main thing. So with the 3 things that we've got to talk about here as well. This is all kind of stuff where if you'd like us to do like more in-depth stuff, we can find people to run workshops on this kind of stuff if you find it useful. So just with anything that's come up from today, do please say like if there's stuff that you feel would be useful to know more about. But I guess on the SEO perspective, I think it's just a little bit about like a small bit does make a quite a difference. So it's just thinking about having that mindset of what would you be searching to find that story and making that like the keyword. If you're on WordPress, the Yoast SEO box at the bottom is really useful, just making sure you fill that out. And kind of flagging on from what Amelia has just said, niches, where she's saying, don't just tag everything with coronavirus. It's better to be niche than it is to be broad, because if you were to tag everything with coronavirus or have that as your keyword for that story, there are going to be a million other articles that you're competing with. So what you need to actually think about is what are the people going to be searching for that are specifically looking for this story. So are they going to be looking for Edinburgh Uni news or Edinburgh Uni exam results delayed, or all of those kind of things that you might actually be searching for to find that story. And I think that's just the basis of SEO, is just thinking about what you would be doing in those settings at the bottom, and then just making sure that with your SEO headline it's all of those key questions answered, like the who, the where, the why, the what. But this is something that we can definitely do more about if it's a thing that people would like a bit of a refresher on.
Yeah, this is like a massive topic in of itself. And yeah, just to be clear, so I wasn't just saying like shove in coronavirus in all your tags because it will just get downranked on Google. Think about like localizing it as much as possible, because remember, your audience isn't like the whole of the UK, it's your student body. So think about what they might be looking for.
And I think it's just a bit of like the benefit for you as a student publication of thinking about these kind of things is this is where you could pull in people who are, searching for stuff but not necessarily looking through the student newspaper, if that makes sense. So all of those key things that we mentioned early on about, what's happening with people's exam results, what's happening with graduation, those kind of articles that you should be writing, this is where you could pull in those people because they've searched University of Edinburgh graduation and you've done a bit of SEO work on the page, and then you could end up coming up higher than, say, that university. So that's why this is potentially like a beneficial thing to do.
Yeah. The next sort of key part was advertising spend. And again, Jen, this is one thing that you particularly picked up. But basically, it's thinking about if it's within your publication's budget to do so, utilizing some of the money that might just be sat there doing nothing in basically helping grow your social and your page.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I'm particularly interested in. Has anyone ever done any kind of like paid social advertising at all for their university? Like, oh, you have. Lizzie, if I unmute you, do you mind if I ask you what kind of stuff you've done?
It isn't for the university, but I've done like other social media advertising before, but not for the university.
Cool. Okay. Like what for, like just as part of a job or something?
Well, I used to like, not anymore, but I used to do YouTube videos, and that was like a way of growing my audience. And so Instagram offer it, if you're a business account on Instagram, they offer you to do like advertising, promote things. You can pay really small amounts on that, as well as the same on Twitter and YouTube. Just if you pay like small amounts at a time, then you can end up just.
And did you find that effective for what you were trying to do?
Yeah, really, really effective, because I think it's the same thing for student media. Really, it's obviously all the channels have to match up and marry together really nicely. And I found that when you promote on all channels at the same time, it just generally works quite well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is one of the things I think that would be really good, like for student media more generally, just to have a bit of like a chat about, because it's a really, really effective way of like reaching people. Like this is one of the reasons why the tab is so effective, is because nationally they put some of their budget on to reaching people. And if you as a student newspaper are like, right, so we're not able to run a print run now for the rest of the year, what are we going to do with this money, or how do we make sure that the student union doesn't take back that money? This is a really good like time to actually experiment with the stuff. So you can get really, really niche. You can say, I want this post to be shown to people who study at the University of East Anglia, for example. You can say, I want this post to be shown to people who visited this location in the past few months, people who are interested in this. So it's a bit of going down a rabbit hole, but for very little money, you can make sure that the people that study at uni are the people that are seeing your content in their Twitter, Instagram, Facebook feeds. So that would be my biggest recommendation to everyone, if you took nothing else away, would be to look at how you could spend a bit of your budget at making your amazing articles show up in people's timelines by putting a little bit of spend on them.
Just to take the question from Media's iPad, I forgot who that actually was. No, that probably wouldn't work because people aren't going to be searching coronavirus free. Most likely, what you want to do is like try and think about how to advertise that story for what it is rather than what it isn't, because people don't search for stuff they're not looking for, if that makes sense. Like very few people are going to be searching the words on Google stories about things that aren't coronavirus, because it's going to throw out things that are about coronavirus. And similarly, if you post on Twitter saying, here's a story that isn't about coronavirus, people that have the word coronavirus muted, as I know a lot of people have right now, because they just want to look after their own mental well-being for whatever reason, don't do that, because it means that will get muted as well. It's always
a really quick resource to add on this is just looking at Google Trends. It's free, it's trends.google.com, I think, or something roughly like that, and you can see how, like, what search terms people are looking for. So you can see if they've gone up, they've decreased, or they've gone up over time, and that can give you a bit of a like steer on what kind of words people might be using to search for the thing you're writing about. And it will also give you related terms as well. And there's another good one called keyword sheeter, as in like sheet of paper, but with an ER on the end. And you can type in basically like the first word or phrase, and then it will give you like a massive list of suggestions as to what people are actually searching for. So I think maybe using those things and just having a bit of a play around is actually quite helpful.
Yeah, and so alongside it, I've like the final sort of main way to get audience, obviously social media. We've spoken about it quite a lot already. One main thing that I think probably most people are already doing, and again, final wave test, who here posts their stories on like an overheard app page or group for the university? Okay, that's actually fewer than I thought. They are as frustrating as those pages often are, and full of spam and people trying to sell tickets and people trying to scam people out of money. They're also everyone who's at your university will probably be in it. And there's a way, like I've seen stats on stories before, you can like triple the reach of a story by posting it on a page, on a group or page like that, because it's just a thing that people always engage with, even by accident, because the way that groups get ranked on Facebook feeds is that if you even like hover over it for like more than a second, it counts as an engagement, which means that the more engagements a group gets, the more it gets ranked up, and it's kind of exponential, which means that these really big groups are always at the top of people's Facebook feeds. So posting your stories on there from an account, which your page, from like an actual page account, not a personal one, is a really great way of increasing your reach, and a really easy one as well. And also thinking about other platforms, so experimenting with other platforms. So stuff like Instagram is all right. It can be difficult to actually translate like Instagram views for like page clicks and stuff. And similarly, actually no, I'll do one more. Who here uses TikTok for their publication? No one. Try it. It's good. I don't like it as a personal thing, but we tested it out with our publication we run for our course, and we were getting like thousands of views on like random crap we were posting, but it was actually translating to quite a few people clicking on our actual stories somehow. The only downside is that you can't directly link stuff on TikTok. So like if you create your beautiful shit post on TikTok, people can't directly click to your page. So it's more about brand awareness, but it could be an interesting way of actually like increasing your brand. Because again, this is something that the tab does again, which a lot of student publications have to compete with, is they just post memes. Like they just post me. I'm not saying you should post memes, but I'm saying that that's one way that they increase they get up ranked on Facebook, is by getting more engagement via just posting shit like memes. Again, I'm not suggesting you do that, but it's something to think about in terms of how have they created this brand? How have they increased the awareness in people's minds? It's through doing stuff like just random stuff being posted, and non-news content being put. So experiment with other platforms. Again, now is the best time to do it, because everyone is just pissing around on their phone right now. Even on their one state sanctioned walk a day, they are still probably pissing around on TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And TikTok as well is just getting exponentially bigger.
Absolutely, the time to experiment, like, and also, like, as a student newspaper, you're under a lot less commercial pressure than you would be in a newsroom. So, you know, just try stuff out, like try doing TikToks. Like, maybe you want to see if you've got like a weekly roundup newsletter that maybe people might be interested in now, because like people are like wanting to be connected to like campus life. So do just use it as like, yeah, a time to experiment and see what works, and kind of lean you into like what you know, the start of next year, when you could be in a really good place because you've used this time to experiment with a load of stuff. And as Ed kind of said, like, just always have in the frame of your mind like what people actually want to read. So as important as it is to do that really high quality journalism, which you absolutely should be doing, you should also be thinking about that balance of how do you, one, make people want to read that, and two, what other things which are maybe, you know, a little bit less highbrow, because it's about like the Nando's down the road or something, but still thinking about what people want to read and balancing that together.
Yeah. Final thing on social media as well, which I forgot what it was, so don't worry. In terms of good software to use as well, so with some, just a final thing before we open it up to questions and stuff. Oh, actually, wait, what's this? Does anyone use a weekly email newsletter for the student website? I don't know. Does anyone else here use a weekly email newsletter for the student website? I'm not aware of any student publications that do. If you want to try it, again, it might be an interesting thing to experiment with. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah, it was more just a throwaway suggestion, really. Like, I do one for Journo resources. It's not quite the same audience, but like, if you were going to experiment with anything, now's the time to try it.
Yeah. So one thing we just wanted to mention is like useful ways to sort of manage your workflow and stuff, just very quickly. Obviously, Zoom is now great. It's overtaken Skype and Google Hangouts, thank God, because I hate that. Also, if Zoom isn't working for whatever reason, stuff like Slack and Discord and like server-based management, well, Discord's not really a management tool, but like it can be used as one, is they are now increased because they know people are going to be using it more. It might be worth using it instead of, because Facebook groups, if you're in like 38,000 Facebook groups, everything just gets buried. Having a separate platform which your newspaper just uses for newspaper stuff might be a really good way of managing that, and obviously creating like collaborative docs. That was a lot of things, and I think that we're going to sort of wrap up the stuff that we've suggested. If people have any questions, again, put them in the chat right now. We'll be taking questions right now. Owain and Jem, do you have anything else to add before we sort of open the floor?
Not really, just to kind of say that like that we really would like your feedback about what we can do to kind of support you at the moment. So we're very open to literally anything, any ideas that you have. So hopefully you'll have all of our email addresses, or you can just message the Facebook page or the Twitter page or the Instagram page, literally anything you want. But whether that's like, you know, you want us to set up some kind of space where editors can chat to each other, or reporters, so maybe that's a Slack group, or whether it's you like, actually we'd like you to get someone in to do a workshop on SEO, or we'd like to know a bit more about paid advertising. So any suggestions or ideas that you have, please do let us know, and we'll, can't promise, but we'll do our best to make something happen.
Yeah, I think on that note as well, just, you know, as we open it up to questions now, we're also very happy to talk about things like, you know, other factors that are impacting your student papers, not just, you know, teaching you how to report. We're here for all of that. So feel free to ask whatever you want now about what we've been talking about today, about, you know, the impact of COVID-19 and on student media, and what we know about that, and, you know, how we may be able to help you in future. Just feel free to chuck anything in there. And also give us ideas for new workshops, because we want to do more of these.
Yeah, and also I've just put mine and Owain's emails in the chat, as well as Mila's, because she's posted hers. If you have any questions or queries, like, we are looking for stuff to do. I mean, I personally am, I'm so bored at home.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, no, maybe not Jem. Jem's like 8,000 things at a time, but like I'm fairly free. So if anyone has any questions, it doesn't even necessarily have to be about this workshop, just generic student media news questions, throw them my way or Ryan's way. And one
Yeah,
of us
and just to stress, obviously everyone's put their emails in there, but like, you know, it may be that you have nothing to ask now because we have thrown a lot of information at you. But do, if something occurs to you tonight or tomorrow, do genuinely let us know. Or even if it's just like you're a third year and you're like, God, I don't know how I'm going to get a job. Like with all of this around, we're happy to look at your CV. Like we can do stuff like that as well. So it can be career development stuff.
Yeah, we're seeing a few people head off now.
So feel free to leave if you would like.
Feel free to leave. If you need to go, feel free to leave. We're going to stick around if you want to ask questions. We're going to stick around until the last person leaves, basically. So this is sort of the formal end, as it were. Thank you so much for coming. And also, Spank is, just for those of you who don't know, Spank has been rescheduled to October. Please do come along. We appreciate it's a change of date, but we're hoping that it'll still be the same weekend it would have been now, if it had gone ahead. So come along to that. We have loads of we're having training resources go up onto the website. We have a couple already on there. We're hoping to expand it now that, again, I have more free time because there's nothing else to do. We also did a piece on, we worked on a piece together with JR and the SPA on stuff to do at home as a student journalist. I think that's gone up on all of our social feeds as well. I'm just thinking of other things to plug while people are just sat here listening to me talk. I don't know.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, honestly, I've just been playing for time when people ask questions.
Patrick, hello. So Patrick just asked in the chat, is Spank still going to be open to third years who'll have graduated by the time it happens? The answer to that question is yes. There's nothing else to add on that.
I'm well old and I'm still allowed to come, so I think you're definitely fine.
Yeah, we haven't been able to get rid of Jem. She keeps coming back every year.
One can correct me if I'm wrong. The way that I'm interpreting it is, and again, tell me if I'm wrong by saying this, is if you were a member of the SPA by the time that the tickets were open, you can come as a SPA member.
From the kind of nerdy governance side of this, you're technically a member a year after you finish. So once you finish university, you're still technically a member for a year after, but that's just for formalities like award entries and stuff like that when you grow up still a student.
And just to clarify, in case it wasn't clear as well, like we are going to still have the awards evening in October. So we've kind of had stalls in getting judges to kind of deal with that anyway. So if you had entered awards or whatever, that still will be happening in October.
We had so Lauren said, not a question, but maybe a workshop on freedom of information would be useful or help to avoid illegal issues. We have we have a training resource up for that, but if that's something that people want a workshop on, I'm sure there are enough data nerds among us to want to do that.
Yep.
Is there any just do the little wave if you'd be interested in an FOI workshop just to.
Cool.
Okay.
We've also had a suggestion of SEO workshop. Anyone interested in that? Cool, a few for that. And anyone for paid advertising? Someone else has suggested that.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
reach would be really good. I think that based on the questions we got on that, that's something that people are really interested in. It's the kind of thing you don't get taught. Even if you get like legal training from your SU, they don't really teach you how to actually get your articles read, which isn't always great.
I'm just going to go to, someone was asking about saving bigger articles for print. I'm going to unmute you now because that sounds like a good question to widen out. Sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Evan? Iwan?
Ewan.
Close. Sorry.
I'm with York Vision, and we have quite a wide reach when we sort of have our actual physical print editions. But as of yet, our online presence isn't that large. We've got some stories that we're quite excited about, and we were going to print in our summer edition, and we were wondering whether we should save these for later print editions where they'll get more impact, or if we should print them sort of soon online.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Has anyone else had like a similar kind of either problem or thoughts?
Put in the chat or wave. Either way works.
Okay.
I mean, I might just make one little point that's very specific to you, Vision. But obviously, you're not the only paper where you are you? So just bear that in mind. I think has Patrick left? I don't know if we have any other news people in here, but just bear that in mind that your situation is going to be different to other universities where there's only one newspaper.
I think also what's worth bearing in mind is just thinking about like the reach that you can get. Like a great story, there's a lot of things that play into it. So with whatever story it is, and I'm sure like we'd be willing to chat to you individually about this if you had something and you wanted to chat to Ed about like what you did with it. But I think the two big things to think about would be, is this story still going to be relevant in 3 months' time? Is it still going to hit the people that it needs to hit? And then also thinking about how many people you can potentially get it to release if you did it now. So sure, you might not have that front page, but there is a very real world where you could still make it reach all of the people that you wanted it to and still make as much of a splash. So I think tying those two things off each other, I would say don't necessarily wait. If you think it's a story that will have more of a kick now, there are ways that you can make sure it reaches people.
Yeah,
I don't know if any of the others.
Yeah, you want to be careful on waiting, especially if you think it's a good story, sooner rather than later is always good. Obviously, you want to brand it well, and because you obviously you're coming back after a year of not existing, so you kind of obviously you will have lost some momentum online because that's just the way that stuff works. This might be the time to start doing paid advertising if it's in your budget. If you think that story is really worth getting out there, but you're worried about your reach, if you think it's worth it and you think that people should read it, focus all your efforts on getting it read. Put it in your overheard groups. If it's within the rules of that confession page, just get someone to write about it in the confessions page and say, "Oh, that story on York Vision is great," even if you're not allowed to link it on there.
Harry, did you want to jump in? You said you managed to get more engagement online, even though Brig was delivered before the uni closed.
Yeah, we got our like delivery of 2,000 papers in on the Friday, and by 5 o'clock that day, after we'd hauled them around the whole campus, the uni said, "Yeah, all of our classes are going online, just stay at home." So it was at that point we then just decided, okay, it's time to get the really time-sensitive content up onto the website, because that then got more engagement, even though we do still now have 2,000 papers with no clue what to do with them. I've got like 1,000 of them sitting in my flat. So
when the toilet roll runs out, you've got a massive supply of paper, mate.
Yep. I'm going to sell it to the neighbours. So
you'll make a big profit.
Jem, I know we invoked the like overheard groups before, but we don't need to start actually repeating the content that people post about us on there.
Sorry.
What's this? So what's the best way to find trending stories? Is it just following brands such as Nando's, McDonald's, etc., or to receive their press releases? Is Matt still here? I just
yes.
Yes. Are you if you're happy just to expand on what you mean by trending stories, we might be able to help you out.
Yep.
Oh. It won't let me.
It's not letting me either.
Okay. We'll move on. If you just type in the chat exactly what you mean by trending stories, we'll come back to you. Hannah says, "Hi, do you have any advice on reporting arts and culture during this time?" Obviously, there isn't much going on at the moment because things being postponed, but still want to keep those sections going. Mila's obviously said like brands have been doing gigs online. So like, for example, if you want to if there's something that's really relevant to your audience on like the National Theatre YouTube, or if there's like a local group doing stuff online, that's one option. Also, if there's any like, if you've got like film society or like TV societies on campus and stuff, and they're still doing stuff, if you really want to get content, review some of their stuff or talk about it. I don't know if there's any other ideas from Gemma or Wine.
I mean, yeah, I think looking at the virtual remote stuff is interesting. There will be like small arts festivals and stuff that will be going on pretty much everywhere. Like I saw a job ad the other day for like the UK's puppetry festival is going online now, which sounds fascinating. So like those quirkier things that might be going online might also be worth looking up as well.
Yeah, and again, if you're not too averse to having a slightly more I don't know how your section works, but if you could maybe interview some local artists who've had stuff cancelled. It might be a bit bleak, but it might be really interesting. There's so many stories of people getting gigs cancelled, like really, some artists who are like just about to break through or like have just broken through and are now like losing all of the traction they built up over like 6 years because of having stuff cancelled. That could be a really good piece. Like obviously your news section might want to nick it, but if you can get it for your own, arts and media section, that might be some really good content.
Also remember that people are generally not doing very much at the moment, and so they may be more receptive to interview requests.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and they might be keen to try and get their brand going still because, as I said, they might have lost a bunch of traction.
Ryan, you've just mentioned something about a diary capture and archive to record events. I don't know if you mind talking a bit about what that is. That might be interesting.
If your microphone is, we also cannot unmute you.
Wait, no,
yeah, my university has started. We've got an archive kind of faculty kind of thing, and they've started to talk about students recording their day about how they're feeling during coronavirus and things, to see how it's impacting the university kind of population more specifically, and seeing how that changes over time as we get the kind of news updates and different headlines come out, and seeing how all that happens, because that might obviously be useful in future for cultural things. And there's also people talking about how they, like, if you're an international student, and how that might impact on you not be able to like go home or something like that, and how they want students to record that, to have a student voice, and to make sure that, because then obviously as a student newspaper we could give some voice to that as well, if we got some diaries or something that might encourage people to talk more about their experiences.
I think that's really nice. Like, I also think there's something maybe quite unifying about even like, there's definitely a trend, I don't know if anyone else has found this, I don't know if I'm aware, but like about kind of like the comfortingness of like almost like normal life, if that makes sense. So even just bringing together stories from students from wherever they happen to be socially distancing / isolating, I think is a fairly, not like, it wouldn't necessarily what you'd be normally doing in a like a normal print run or whatever, but just bringing those really normal stories of how people are coping with stuff or what they're doing, I think is actually a really nice way that you can bring people together.
Yeah, and also just to add as well, to go back slightly as well, if you're looking for other stuff to cover, local art, like small local artists who might have been doing gigs that you might have covered, they might do those online. Like I've seen a few from like where I am. They're like really small, the kind of thing that a student paper would, probably go along and do like a really small piece on, review their online gig, maybe. I don't know. Might be a shout. What else have we got?
There was an expanding here from Matt.
Matt, yeah.
So Jem, if you want to hop in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess it's about kind of, we can definitely look at maybe look at writing. So the response was basically how to do kind of trending stories, like the stuff that we mentioned earlier around here's the deals that you can access now, like when will McDonald's and Victoria Centre reopen, that kind of thing. So I think one, it's to a certain extent that localization of a national story. There will be, if it's a big chain, there will be a lot of people obviously talking about McDonald's or whatever anyway, so you can kind of just localize that story. And then also I think just maybe thinking a bit creatively about what institutions and stuff like are a big name in your city, and kind of going out there and doing that proactively. So off the top of my head, it could be that there is like, a particular bar that people go to fairly often, and you could just reach out to them and go, roughly when you think you're going to be open. You probably won't get much of an answer, but then you can still justifiably do that story. Or you could equally be looking for, what are the Cardiff takeaways that are still open and on delivery that actually like require your support as independent businesses. So we'll definitely aim to put something together around that. But I think it's, one, about taking any national questions and looking to localize them, and two, just thinking about those popular institutions and how you would go about doing it.
And also, like on the topic of local shops and local like small chains like takeaways and stuff, a lot of them are doing like community work right now. Might be worth chatting to them about what kind of stuff they're doing in the local area. Again, it's not so much student focused, but it's like local area focused. If you're like really looking for stuff, it might be worth looking into, especially if there are a lot of students at your university are still at the city. Is there anything else? I think we have covered everyone. Has anyone else got any other questions or comments or concerns or any of the above?
Has anyone got any fun weekend plans?
Who's going to do their lovely state-sanctioned walk right now? No? Okay. Yeah, I said we're just going to carry on chatting until people either ask things or anything. Oh yeah, in terms of community work, could also talk about how students are helping with the volunteer effort. Yeah, that's very true. Again, those kinds of stories are where joining those like community groups I mentioned are really, really good. Like I'm in a lot of them for Cardiff because I was covering a patch there, and the kind of stories you get, like everything is posted there because there are just lots of very bored, usually middle-aged people putting every single detail of everything they see ever on those, and you will just get a ridiculous amount of usually crap, but you might get something useful in amongst that. But then also trying to find a way to have a student angle for that is great.
And for those of you who have medical programs or like nursing degrees at your universities, it may be worth reaching out to people in those departments, because we know that for some they've been sending final years out to actually do things, and that would be an interesting angle to take.
Yeah, and if there are any like, for example, like the charity groups, like any like rag groups at your uni that are then that might be now doing stuff in the local area where they usually might be doing their like fundraisers to go on like jollies to Everest or something, then if they're now doing like advocacy in the local area, that's another good idea.
And your SUs, what happened to the food that was left when everything shut down? Have they donated it? Who knows? Like, I know in Exeter it got donated, didn't it? I think.
I have no idea.
I saw some. I saw an interesting piece in the Guardian the other day, which is maybe slightly related and also worth looking at. It was around universities that have their own food banks for students, and it kind of had a couple of lines about how they'd kind of pivoted in some of them to either some of them had to shut because of coronavirus stuff, so there are students who weren't getting their food, or some of them had pivoted to be like, we're actually going to now deliver this to students that are here in isolation. So just looking at all of those kind of things is really really useful.
I'm trying to think of anything else. I think the stuff about like where the food's gone is interesting. I think wastage is something that's very interesting. I think I said food banks, have they been affected by this at all? Is one. I mean, you might have students that are volunteering at those. Might be something good. What's this? People are and student journalists doing stuff to support a future career in journalism. It's interesting you might ask that. An article about that it covers that exact topic, which the link of which I will post in about 4 seconds when it loads. Someone else cover for me while I find the link.
It's in. Done it.
Yes. Oh, yeah, there you go. Got it. Yeah. To give the summary of that, obviously read through it. I think it's an amazing piece of words. Yeah. Basically, there are things we go from there. The main things are like look for some of the stories we've talked about today. Try your hand at freelancing. A lot of places are really short-staffed, and this might be a chance to not only get your byline out there, but also start to get paid, which is always nice, and get like maybe even kickstart a career in freelancing. Again, Journo Resources has like 1,000 really great pieces on that, and I'm not just saying that because Jem's here. It's just a really good website in general, full of resources for journos, as the name might suggest. Is it worth learning shorthand? Yes. I hate it with a burning passion, but it's really useful. And if you are thinking of doing either a postgrad qualification journalism or a NCTJ course, or looking to go into local reporting, shorthand is something that all of those three things will either want you to do as part of it or want you to come with.
It's also really fun to leave around in houses where people don't know shorthand and they just think it's some like amazing language. So like it's fun for the lols as well.
Yeah.
And it's just a repetitive. It's the thing that's hard about it is you just need to practice. So like it's not about like something that's academically difficult, if that makes sense. So it's just something that you have to do every day to get better. So now is a great time to do it.
Yeah. And also I mean it's just really, it's a really cool skill, and the kind of thing which, if especially now that stuff's going to get like jobs, like we might be facing a massive job problem right now, and it's the kind of thing which might get you a bit of a head start with someone else in a slightly cynical way. And as Jem said, you can write in cool hieroglyphics, and that's pretty neat. I think there's the one textbook, and I think it's just the NCGA shorthand. T-line is the one you'll learn. That's like the one for journalists. Don't try and learn Pitman; it's impossible. And usually for like secretarial jobs rather than journalism. Yeah, it's definitely it's just really difficult. Get your 100 words a minute if you can. Obviously, yeah, you'll want to look for tutors on that. Any other questions before we sit here in silence? Lovely.
Cool.
Oh, thank you so much. You're welcome.
Cool. Shall we call it?
Yes, let's call it.
The one thing I'd say is we'll definitely be doing other stuff. So all of those workshops and stuff, all of those resources, will make sure that things happen for you.
Because you all had to email in, we've got all of your email addresses, so we'll email out to you when we've got the recording of this sorted and uploaded, and when we have new workshops appear.
Yeah, and like it's the idea is it seems to be like people like these, so we will definitely do more of these. So yeah, thanks so much for coming. Yeah, cheers.